Hello Team FD and welcome back to Sunday Vibes. This week we have taken the show on the road at the Albany pub on Great Portland Street. I'm joined by Dougie, by Pat. Joe is doing something for Sky, but he'll be back with us next week. And we're here, gentlemen, today to discuss the riskiest January transfers. Some in the offing, some that have happened. And I'm going to pick your bulbous brains. Big old brains. How are we before we get started?
Normally shaped brains. We're good. Good. It's good to continue our tour of London's premier storm basements, which is where we are today. It's a little bit echoey in here, so hope you enjoy hearing what we have to say twice. But it's nice to get a change of venue. Maybe it will prompt some new synaptic connections. We'll say something intelligent.
Bit of inspo. Dougie, how are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well. Had some people around for dinner last night, so I was chefing. Made my sweet chili beef, actually. And it went down very well.
Sweet chili beef.
Yeah.
Why did he say that so sensually as well?
Because it was a euphemism.
He started to lean in. Keys in the bowl.
Well, I can make it for you guys anytime.
New knitwear for the both of you.
Yes, this was a Christmas coat. It's
Yeah.
good. It's very cold in London this week, so a little fleece number.
Right, new knitwear. Let's talk new signings then. Let's go Mudryk, because when I put out the tweet, a lot of our subscribers answered with Mudryk straight away. I think the risk here obviously pertains to the financial commitment rather than people doubting his credentials as someone with a really high ceiling, right? So what do we make of this? 70 million euros up front plus 30 million euros in add-ons. I think Chelsea's add-ons were more realistic than Arsenal's, hence why they sort of pit them to the post with Shakhtar Donetsk. I think it relies on them winning the Champions League and Premier League during his 7-8 years there. Initial thoughts then, or actually you've had some time to marinate with this transfer now, haven't you? So what, 72 hours? What do you make of it? Let's go to you first, Pat. As an Arsenal fan, do you feel disappointed? Are you impressed at Chelsea pipping you to the post or what?
If they really wanted him, then yeah. I mean, it's good that they managed to get him over the line. But to be honest with you, I think Arsenal got a little bit lucky here. I think Arsenal were offering too much money for a player with not a huge kind of data set coming out of a very weak division. I mean, he was impressive in the Champions League this season. And when it comes to raw tools, his pace is just something that you can't argue with. It's phenomenal. But he's 22, so he's a year older than Martinelli and Saka. He's got 12 career goals. 12 career goals. I think he's got 3,300 minutes across his career as well. And people say he's a great dribbler. There's not a lot of evidence of that. His dribble success rate in the Champions League has been incredibly low. It's been like 28%. What he is a kind of push and go dribbler. So when he's got space, he's absolutely phenomenal. And I could see him, in a way, I think he makes a lot more sense for Chelsea than Arsenal, because I could imagine him playing as more of a wing back under Potter. I think Potter will be able to find a way to get him that space. Whereas at Arsenal, he'd have been required to fill the roles taken by Martinelli and Saka. That's a completely different sort of thing. I don't know. I don't like it at the price, because I think the question at this price is not what's his ceiling, but what's his floor. You're paying a price which basically says we think you're going to be one of the best in the world, and you need to be one of the best in the world to justify this fee. Well, if he ends up being just okay or poor or even only good, then it's not really been worth it. And to Chelsea, less of a risk than Arsenal. They can spread this fee out over a really long contract. They've got more money, so it's not too much of a risk from that point of view. But I personally, if I was paying this amount of money, there are loads of other guys on the market who are proven quantities, who've got much more of a track record in a top league, and who have a clear skill set that dovetails with a possession side which are going to face set defenses, rather than a guy who is going to be playing in European competition on the break. So from my point of view, I wouldn't have done it for Arsenal. I think Arsenal, there are a lot of Arsenal fans who, when they didn't get this move over the line, said, oh, well, Chelsea just like throwing the money around. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry, but Arsenal were willing to overpay significantly for this guy as well. The fact that Chelsea have overpaid by more is not a plus for Arsenal. It doesn't mean Arsenal were being intelligent. It means they got a little bit lucky.
I think David Ornstein said there wasn't much at all in terms of finances between the two offers. I think they might have offered Mudryk 10k a week less, but apart from that, pretty much identical. Apart from those caveats, that those nuances with the bonuses, so on and so forth. Dougie, what are your thoughts on it then? Do you think, like Pat, Arsenal have escaped financial, not turmoil here, but a bit of a black hole?
Potentially. I think there are some obvious. If he was being signed alone for this winger position, I would have had less of an issue with it. But the fact they're signing Mudryk as well, the fact they've got already so many stacked attacking midfielders and wingers, I think they're creating an enormous risk that they'll be able to shift their deadwood this summer for the prices they expect. Like, no one in Europe has any money. We've seen it in this January. We saw it in the summer. No one, none of the big clubs are going to be picking up Ziyech, Pulisic for the fees that Chelsea would want for them. And I think they're just making a mistake further down the line. And it's not like winger is the only glaring issue in their squad. It's really not. I mean, their central midfield options after this summer, particularly if they don't retain Kante, are really quite weak. Their central defence options haven't been great since the departures of Rudiger and Christensen and Koulibaly not hitting the ground running. And then you probably think in the next 2-3 years, they probably need a backup right back for Reece James. And they probably need a new goalkeeper. So to spend this much money in January, with Nkunku potentially arriving in the summer as well, just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think they are creating a massive, massive issue for themselves in the summer, as I say. The good thing about Mudryk is he's on an enormously long contract, which is to get round FFP, which is very risky in itself, in my opinion, because if the transfer doesn't work out, it's going to be very difficult to shift him. And he's also going to have a lack of motivation, really, you'd think, over the course of that contract. And we've already seen it with the likes of Sterling and Koulibaly. Have they been paid too much for what they're probably delivering right now? Probably. But Mudryk's only on £97,000 per week, which is, in comparison to lots of his Chelsea teammates, really quite low, which is a positive in that respect. He's a very exciting talent, but I think he's probably more suited to a team that plays in massive open spaces. I don't think Chelsea over the last 18 months, even since Tuchel's arrival, have really been thriving in a counter-attack scenario. They're often a slow, sort of methodical, possession-based side. And I just don't know whether it's going to get the best out of his skill set. So, very good player. The fee is not a disaster in and of itself. But I think with the other signings coming in that area, they're creating a massive issue for the summer.
Yeah, you touched on it just there. Let's discuss the wages a little bit more then, because it was interesting to see how the narrative was being spun by various media outlets that, Bowley is bringing in these baseball-style contracts. Obviously, they can amortise the fee, which you sort of intimated out there, over the 8 years, which means that paying 100 million for euros for a player isn't going to impact them as significantly as it would have if he signed a 3, 4, 5 year deal, a more traditional deal, let's say. But it is 97k a week feels reasonable for one of Europe's leading young talents, right? I think that's a £40 million package in total over the course of his contract, which can run until 2031. But yeah, his wages were sort of put forward in a lot of articles I read as an example of how the hierarchy were trying to transform the payroll. And that was like getting, I suppose, ahead of these 300k a week deals. And it is worth noting, he's on 90k less than Chilwell, 50k less than Havertz, 20k less than even the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and Badiashile has come in on a very similar deal. However, this is the ownership group which signed off Sterling at 325, which runs until 2027. Koulibaly at 295, which runs until 2026. And I know that any strategy has to have some pragmatism built into it. You can still do different short-term things which help you build towards long-term success. But Fofana, 200k a week. Cucurella, 175k a week. They also signed off Reece James at 250k a week. So I'm struggling to see any sort of consistency across the board. And that might become an issue 2-3 years down the line when Mudryk maybe is firing on all cylinders. And he's like, I know we agreed 97. I know I signed off my long-term future, but I'm looking at other players who are deemed world-class in my position, Fofana, Reece James, and they're on double the money. On a human level, that just will cause friction, won't it?
It's an issue right now as well. They're trying to get this contract over the line with Mason Mount. Well, supposedly contract talks have been kind of stalling because Mason Mount obviously wants a huge payday, having been a key player under every manager he's played for at Chelsea. Well, Chelsea don't really have much of an argument to say, well, we're not going to pay you that much, because he'll just say, you just spent 100 million on a child who's never played in a top division. You're telling me that you can't give me another 50k a week or 80k a week. And now there are rumours that Liverpool want him, which would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So with these things, it's never just one move, right? As you say, it's how it affects the move after that, how it affects the dressing room. And maybe it's a little bit overplayed, but it's going to be a real test of Potter's ability to get that dressing room to pull together. Because at the moment, it feels like there's a kind of surging toxicity waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's not made it easy for him to manage those egos, has it? This sort of scattergun approach to wages. But I mean, Shakhtar Donetsk, I think it was the vice chairman or something along those lines, Sergei Palkin maybe, said he was very impressed by their vision moving forward, right? So maybe there's some moving parts behind the scenes we're not privy to. Dukes, what do you think a successful half season looks like for Mudryk then, from January till May?
I mean, on a personal level, you'd probably want him to be starting pretty much every game, to be honest, at that fee, given how most of the Chelsea attackers have really struggled this season. In terms of where Chelsea end up, they really need to be getting close to the Champions League, I think, after this spend, to be honest. Even if you're looking at a long-term vision, even if you're signing players on eight-year contracts or whatever, there needs to be some return on this investment. Like, they can't just miss out entirely on European football and just be like, oh, this is a write of a season, especially after sacking, a manager that won the Champions League at the start of the year. Like, you can't just finish 10th after this spending, in my opinion. And I think these long-term contracts, just to go back on that slightly, it's a really interesting point because, you never have a crystal ball in football. You never know how things are going to turn out. Mudryk could do his ACL next year. He could never be the same player again. And then you've got a player for 8.5 years who is just simply very difficult to shift, because 3 years into this deal, he'll still have 5 years left on his contract. So even if Chelsea want to sell then, they'll still want a big fee for a player that hasn't performed for 3 years at Chelsea. This is an imaginary scenario, of course, but you are creating a scenario where you need a lot of finances down the line to make this deal ever worthwhile. And with an 8-year deal, there's a reason no other club does 8-year deals. It's so risky, just because you can never predict what's going to happen with their form, confidence. Maybe he doesn't adapt to England. Better players have struggled to adapt to England in the past. Look at Angel Di Maria. He left after 6 months or left after a year at United. So I just think they're creating a massive issue. In terms of Mudryk, I'd love to see him deliver in the Premier League. I think he could be a sensational player in the Premier League, to be honest. I mean, that pace is pretty much uncoachable. And uncoachable to any defence as well. There's worse players that have had a Premier League career. Look at someone like Dan James, who's basically just a pace merchant, and how much fear that often puts into the opposition. Mudryk's got a lot more about him than someone like Dan James, of course. So I'm expecting an impact, but I just want Chelsea to not just write off this season, because I think that would be really bad for morale going forward.
Yeah, he was the fastest player in the Champions League group stages, wasn't he, this campaign? So he is absolutely lightning, and that is going to be a useful tool against teams that play a really high line. But like you said, it remains to be seen how he can adapt his game to play against sitting defences, low block, so on and so forth. Yeah, worth stating that should all the respective add-ons in their deals, Bowley/Clear Lakes deals, be triggered, the total sum of which they've sort of committed so far will be $490 million. Astronomical.
That's mental.
Also mental that news has emerged that Mudryk almost joined Bayer Leverkusen last season for 20 million euros. Brentford thought they had a fee agreed at 30 million euros. So for his value to triple in that time is wild. Are we all happy to see Shakhtar, a club like Shakhtar, been through so much, get a fee like that? Yes. Does that make it sensible for the buying party? Absolutely not.
Especially when a considerable amount is going towards the war effort as well, which is a really nice touch.
Yeah, I think it was the owner had committed 25 million of his own money as a result of this to various war efforts. Let's move on then to Trossard, because those deals are very much intertwined. It's kind of just about been confirmed. A fee has been agreed of £21 million plus £6 million in add-ons. He, as we shoot on Friday, apparently is going for a medical. How do you feel about this as a sort of... It's being presented as a risk, I suppose, by some Arsenal fans or the Arsenal fans on my timeline, because I think they're trying to make out to go from Mudryk to Trossard is showing a lack of ambition, or there's drop off there in terms of ability, in terms of potential, and there's this thought, which I think is being revised almost by the hour. I feel like people are starting to get more sensible about the Trossard deal, that Arsenal should be doubling down on elite talent to get this unlikely title, rather than sensible squad acquisitions like Trossard. Which camp are you in?
I think the idea that you can get this elite talent in the middle of the season is not really very accurate, because I don't even know if Mudryk's that. Like, when it comes to actual ability, Trossard is the better player right now than Mudryk. Mudryk has higher upside, and he's like a player for the future. I'm totally fine with this. Like, it looks like it's going to be a 3-year deal. He's not going to be on huge wages. He can cover across the front line. I think this is exactly the sort of move you do in the middle of the season, especially when, after Mudryk, it sounds like Arsenal were also looking at Moussa Diaby of Leverkusen, and also got quoted about 100 mil. And if every under 25 winger in Europe you're getting quoted about 100 mil for, the sensible thing is to find another kind of deal to do.
Yeah.
Leandro Trossard is someone who Arsenal actually looked at years ago before they did the Nicolas Pepe deal. And he's been a reliable Premier League contributor. You know, he's been this season, he's been about generally 0.45 XG and XA per 90. That's pretty good. He's played a couple of different roles. So last season, more creativity, lots more dribbles. This season, dribbles way down, but shots up. So he can clearly play different roles. He's played as a wing back. He played as a wing back against Arsenal, in fact, and scored against us. So that sort of tactical ability is, I think it makes a lot of sense. He's not going to be a big enough name to be a problem in the dressing room. I think he's had a problem with De Zerbi personally, but
Was it Albert Stuyvenberg, your assistant coach, actually managed him at Genk, and he was like, "Guys, he's a good guy. You know, he's not a troublemaker," which is a weird narrative that was being peddled about 24 hours ago. Right?
And I think quite often, you know, these players go to other clubs, and it's just a different situation.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a troublemaker at, say, I don't know, I don't want to talk to someone, but say you're a troublemaker at like Brentford, and you go to Manchester United, you can't be a troublemaker in the same way because you'll be sat down. Yeah. Everyone will say, "Come on." Like this club is you're obviously Arsenal, bigger than you. And I think at Arsenal, given the way that the whole team is kind of really so clearly moving as one towards, you know, this title challenge, and given that you have players, particularly like Zinchenko, who clearly have become very quickly leaders in the squad, I don't think that those guys are going to take it from Trossard, who comes in and tries to be a hard ass.
Listen, anyone with eyes that sad, who look that, you know, sad, can't be a troublemaker. If anything, I feel like he needs just a
little help.
A little.
That's what he needs. He needs like a little pinch of the cheek. Yes. But genuinely, you know, like he's obviously not going to set the world on fire. But if he got, I don't know, what, 6-7 goals and assists over the back half of the season, wouldn't that be a good return?
That'd be great. I mean,
and if he gets injured or if he's not that good, he can still play in the Europa League, and Arsenal will be no worse off than they were. And let's be honest. In 2 years' time, if Arsenal win the title this season, in 2 years' time, no one's going to care whether Trossard played and scored or not. If Arsenal don't win the title this season, they will not care about having wasted 21 million on Trossard. They won't give a shit. Plus, next season, Arsenal are going to have the Champions League to contend with, right? So, from that point of view, I just think you never get mocked for a £20 million transfer not working out. It just doesn't work that way. So I think this is just like a sort of sensible move. People are absolutely right. It's not exciting and it's not one for the future, but he's 28. He's probably got 3 years in his legs. Arsenal have given him a 3-year contract and he's going to be a backup. It's completely fine.
So not a risk at all, we're saying. It doesn't demonstrate lack of ambition, probably more practicality, solid plan B.
Whenever people talk about lack of ambition, that's your sign that you don't need to listen to that person.
Okay, there we have it. Let's move on to Jorginho Rutter then, who I knew very, very little about prior to someone pinging me on Twitter. 20-year-old French striker. Again, I think the risk here mainly pertains to the fee and not his ability. Because reportedly the fee could rise to £35 million, which that's with add-ons and incentives, which would be Leeds' record outlay. I think it's 27 million at current on Rodrigo a couple of summers back. That's pretty sizable for someone with only 26 top-flight starts to his name. And obviously Leeds are struggling in that department. I think take out Rodrigo's goals, and I think it's Crescencio Somerville on 4, Rodrigo has 10, and then after that's like Pascal Struijk on 2. So I think they had to move for someone in that area. Patrick Bamford's body failing him.
I know, unfortunately.
But was there a more practical solution? Should they be making, high risk, high reward transfers like this?
Yeah, I mean, their big money transfers in recent years haven't really come off. I mean, Rodrigo had a comparatively poor first 2 seasons. Yeah. He's obviously doing the job now, but he's overperforming his XG, I believe, as well. But someone like Diego Llorente at centre-back hasn't really delivered. Robin Koch as well was a reasonable amount of money, hasn't really delivered. Like they haven't really come off so far. But, in a more general sense, it's quite an exciting time to be a Leeds fan. There's the 49ers Enterprise, which is the business consortium basically behind the San Francisco 49ers have now got a 40% stake in Leeds, and they are wanting to buy the entire club at some stage in this year. I was writing about it this week.
Yeah, the Athletes think it'll be done by the end of the summer, right?
Yeah, which is quite exciting. So yeah, money shouldn't be as tight as it has been, but Radrizzani has said in the last 6 months, like, in order to compete with the better end of the Premier League, like, we do need to start spending money. Ruta, I think it's quite an expensive fee, to be honest. I know he's got a lot of potential. I saw Rafa Honigstein, who watches a lot more German football and knows a lot more about German football than I do. And he said that is quite a hefty fee for where he's at right now. Hoffenheim have had a kind of couple of years of sort of drifting. They probably don't have the talent in that squad that they have in years gone by. I think Kramaric is slightly on the wane. David Raum was exceptional when he was at Hoffenheim. But Rus is probably one of their better players. But was it £35 million? 35 million euros? Does seem like quite a lot.
Pounds, I think.
Pounds,
yeah.
Okay. And it's what, four goals and assists in 15 games this season, I believe. It's not sort of knock your socks off stats, but at the same time, he's a lot of potential. I saw the Athletic article saying he could be likened to Roberto Firmino, which is maybe a little bit lazy because Firmino, of course, came from Hoffenheim, but can play in that central role, can also play wide as well. So if he contributes between now and the end of the season, and it's a crazy tight relegation battle this year, it's like 7 or 8 sides that could all go down. If he contributes, then yeah, fine, maybe it might well be worth it. But to be honest, I don't think I've seen enough of him week in, week out, because he's still relatively raw to say this is a nailed-on guy that's going to really explode in 2 to 3 years' time. And if they're in the Championship in 2 to 3 years' time, I think they might well regret this signing rather than signing and improving their defence, basically.
Yeah, a huge boon for Hoffenheim. I think they paid €750,000 for him in the winter window in 2021. So that's a 6,000% return
in 2 years,
on investment. Incredible work from them. I had a look at his numbers. I think obviously Leeds pursued Cody Gakpo as well, didn't they? The Ketelare. So they're going after someone who's not an out-and-out number 9. Obviously, you kind of hinted at that with the Firmino comparison. And that's, I think, where his skill set lies. So that is part of the appeal, that you can play anywhere along the forward line, like you've already said. I mean, 4 goals and assists in 11 starts this season does follow up a pretty highly respectable 10 goals and assists in 13 starts last season, but 20 substitute appearances in there as well. So he was somewhat of a super sub. And it also hasn't stopped Leeds spending elsewhere as well, because they've signed Werber, haven't they, from Salzburg?
That's a very good point, actually, about Mike, because they have strengthened central defence.
If it had come at the cost of other transfers, I'd be less keen on this. But it does feel like they're trying to secure their Premier League status, and the 49ers, are playing their part in that by drip feeding some cash in. I mean, other forwards they were linked with very much of this kind of ilk as well. Coventry City's Victor Gyökeres.
Oh, yeah. I've seen him play against Sunderland
who's on fire
this year.
at the moment.
He's a very, very talented striker.
Where was he before? He was at Swansea. He was at...
Yeah, I'm not sure. He can also play on the left as well. I think he's got 12 Championship goals this year. I think he's second for Championship goals, and like physical specimen, very fast. Like, he looks like he could make the step up. But at the same time, we've seen some Championship strikers more recently, like Che Adams, Adam Armstrong. I know they're at the same club, but they haven't really delivered, at least consistently. So maybe they thought performing at Hoffenheim reasonably well is a better risk than someone who's performing well in the Championship.
I think he's performed at Hoffenheim very well. He's been at kind of 0.4, 0.45 XG a lot of the time that he's been there. He's 20. He's so young. He's 3 years away from a point where you'd expect him to start approaching his peak. He's reasonably versatile as well. And I kind of think that they've earned the right to overspend a little bit on this one, given that they paid, $4 million for Gnonto, or the very low fees that they got Mark Rocker and Tyler Adams for. If they'd bought Gnonto and Rutter together for kind of 20 million a piece, we wouldn't have had an issue with it. But they pay 4 for one, 35 for the other. I'm not saying that this is like a good price. I'm just saying that they've saved money in other areas. They can afford to go and make a splashy move. And to be honest, for them to go down this season, a lot of weird stuff would have to happen. They're far better than at least 5 teams in the league.
Definitely on paper, yeah.
Yeah, well, and just in reality as well. I mean, like, some of the teams in this league are absolutely shocking this season. So I think they're likely to stay up. Obviously, if they go down in a year or two, it'll be frustrating. But I still just think they're building something kind of interesting there. So I'm happy for them to make moves like this.
Yeah, but just, I suppose, echoing your sentiments, they're not struggling up front this season. But in terms of Their defence, I think, only 14th have a worse expected goals against. So maybe some other defensive reinforcements are necessary. And then we can kind of categorise this as a fine January, holistically speaking.
Yeah. On a more general sort of Leeds point, I was talking to a Leeds fan the other day, shout out Brandon, and he was saying that Leeds fans are pretty miserable at the moment, even though they're not definitely going down, as Pat says, and probably shouldn't go down. But they were like, we've lost the entertainment of the Bielsa days and we just can't sort out this defence. So that's probably got me on the track of maybe they should have spent more in defence.
Yeah.
But as I said, so many of their defensive signings haven't really hit the ground running.
But a lot of their other names on the shortlist, I've seen Sebastian Juwissi is at FC Austin. I think he was at Zenit St. Petersburg before, and he was at like River Plate or one of the Argentinian teams before that.
They got him straight out of Argentina. Zenit did.
They were linked with him, and they were also linked with Hwang Hee-chan, who Jesse Marsh has apparently been a long-term admirer of. So clearly hellbent on securing a forward. Rutter's apparently top of the list, so they've secured their top target. So I guess we could categorise that as business well done. And yeah, let's just see what Marsh does with it. Okay, let's move on to some others then. You sounded it out earlier. Noni Madueke to Chelsea.
Another winger going in there. I'm not against the player. I think he's been really good for PSV for a number of years, and this is really exciting. I think, a couple of years ago we were talking about him going to Spurs pre-Kulusevski, like that would be quite a sensible move. I've got nothing against the player, but he's got a certain amount of pressure on him to be better than Christian Pulisic has been over the last 18 months, to be better than Hakim Ziyech has been in the last 18 months. And these are players that Chelsea have really struggled to get consistent, numbers out of, or consistency out of, really, in inconsistent minutes. And will Madueke start every game? No, I can't see it. I mean, how are they forming this side for next year in particular when Nkunku's supposed to arrive as well? I just don't understand it. It's just stockpiling talent, and it's going to be so difficult to shift these players on. So I like the player. He's been outshone by Cody Gakpo and Xavi Simons this year, but it doesn't mean he's necessarily a bad player. He's probably had a slightly worse year than in years gone by so far. But this is another really exciting player. It just feels like I don't see the overall picture in what they're planning to do with their attack. It feels like one big name that we aren't even talking about could be moved on this summer, like a sort of Kai Havertz sort of style. And for me, they just need to sign a more natural number 9 than endless wingers.
Pat, any concerns with his injury record as well? Because it's not been great, and he's approaching 21, not far off, and he's only got 21 top-flight starts to his name at the moment. So he desperately needs minutes. Like Dougie's made out there, minutes are going to be hard to come by at Chelsea.
Well, maybe. I mean, I think it looks like at Chelsea that Potter doesn't really have a favoured lineup. So I think if you impress him in training, you're going to go into the team. It looks that way at the moment. Yeah, the injury record is a concern, but he's extremely young. His numbers have been exactly what you would want to see for a player coming out of a weak league. Every time he's played, he's been phenomenal. I think his numbers are better than Gakpo's, really. I don't particularly rate Gakpo. And he's homegrown, which means that if he doesn't work out, you can probably get half your money back. Whereas some of these guys, that's not going to be the case. If Mudryk flames out, I don't know what you do with him. If Gakpo flames out, you've got to try and sell him probably back to the Eredivisie, and they don't have a lot of money. So from that point of view, I think it works, and it's a homegrown player. That's also helpful. It's an overpay, but in the scheme of things, the way Chelsea have been doing business, they just don't care. Like Doug says, I can't work out what the plan is. They have to commit to Potter and say this is going to be our guy long term, regardless of the situation. They're going to have to try and clean house this summer. But as Doug says, and this is something that we've really struggled with when we talk to our Chelsea supporting friends, that they just seem to think you can just sell players, that you can just move players on when they're not working, when they're on big contracts. You can't. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to, we talk about a player on 100k in the Premier League. It's not that much. That's a huge sum of money for every other club in Europe. So if they're trying to shift all these guys in the summer, it's going to be really, really difficult. And if they can't get rid of them, then they're going to be in a dressing room spiral that's going to take a lot of work to get them out of. So look, Madueke in isolation, like the player, if you can get him over his fitness issues, he's young enough, his numbers are good enough that he could genuinely be a star.
Yeah.
My bigger concern is, what are Chelsea going to look like? What is Chelsea's plan? And when you feel like you've messed up a transfer after a couple of months, just going and buying another player in that position is it's not really how you solve it. It's not FIFA. At a certain point, you have to try and build. You can't just keep buying.
My problem with it is just curtailing his progression. When he does play, like you've said, his numbers are insane, comparatively speaking, to people in his position from leagues outside of the top 5. But missed 18 games this season with an ankle injury. Has only started 2 league games, in fact. He missed 25 the season before that with a variety of muscle issues. So it's not even just one issue that has been plaguing him. 10 games missed the season before that even. So what I want to see is him get fit and then get consistent minutes in a league that's not physically punishing, so he can build himself up and then have a run at the Premier League. So I don't mind his numbers, great, big ticket from that perspective. The fee, I think, is absolutely fine. It's pretty middling for someone with his ceiling. It might even be the right sort of club, but it feels like the wrong time. You've just bought Felix in on loan. He's probably going to...
I forgot about him.
He's probably going to occupy that left-hand side at some point if Kai Havertz stays central. So my solution here would be to loan him back to PSV for the next 6 months and then readdress in the summer. But it doesn't appear like that is happening. So,
I'd try and loan him to a Premier League club, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I don't think
don't want him sat on the bench for 6
I know,
months.
but I don't think another half season at PSV really tells you much, except playing him into fitness, which you could do over the summer if it came to it. I'd rather, if I was going to loan him out at this point, and I'm Chelsea, I'd loan him to a proper league.
Do you know what is a great indicator of
or the
everything
Premier
we've been
League.
warning about for the summer? And we'll getting onto this transfer in a little bit in more detail. But Memphis Depay has joined Atletico Madrid for €3 million. Now,
This is a bad deal, though.
I agree, but Memphis Depay, Barcelona were offered €15 million in the summer. He refused to go. Players can do that. They don't have to leave. This is the scenario that Chelsea are going to end up with, where players or clubs, end up buying these players for way below their market value. No matter what you think of Memphis Depay, he's worth more than €3 million. So Chelsea are creating a scenario where they are stockpiling talent. Lots of this talent are used to being stars in their own side. Madueke and Nkunku, Mudryk in particular in the last 6 months. They are not going to be happy with being bench players or being rotated players. And the players that are already existing in this lineup, Sterling, Havertz, Mount, Aubameyang, less so Aubameyang, they all want to start as well. I can just see a toxic storm brewing. And if Graham Potter doesn't manage to get a better tune out of this side between now and the end of the season, you are just looking at a toxic maelstrom of intense players that all want to play at the same time. They're all on big wages. They're all signed for massive money. They're all on huge contracts that you can't get rid of. I just see an absolute hellhole arriving for Chelsea in 6 months to a year.
Yeah, Koulibaly. Is he going to accept a role on the bench when they've just bought a guy who's going to play instead of him? Aubameyang contracted till the end of next season. Who's going to want him at his price point? These are really difficult situations to manage, really difficult. And as Dougie said, right at the top of all this, they've got to strengthen in central midfield. They have to probably buy a new goalkeeper. They have to buy at least one right back, you'd have thought. This is hard work to do. And if in the course of that, they also have to pay some guys to off, then it's going to become extremely expensive and extremely difficult. And you might be looking at 1 or 2 revolutions of this side before you get to a point where you really can compete consistently. So I don't know, man. They might get lucky. Mudryk might be phenomenal. Madueke goes out on loan to Southampton, has a banging half season, comes back and he's in great form. But and then they're able to find buyers. But if only 1 or 2 of those things don't happen, then suddenly they're in serious trouble.
The one thing they might think is that they didn't initially spend the money on the players that are leaving, like the Ziyech's, the Pulisic. So maybe they just don't care. Seriously, just sell them for knockdown fees.
But if you still owe money if you still owe amortized transfer fees, then you are still going to have to work out what you do with that. You might be paying a club you bought a player from while having sold that player for nothing to another club who are paying you nothing.
I was trying to throw them a bone. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not underestimate the job that Graham Potter has in terms of
Poor guy.
managing minutes, managing egos, and creating a winning side in the midst of that. Because if they were getting results, I doubt we'd be discussing it to this extent,
For sure.
but they're not. So everything is laid out bare. Okay, let's move on to Memphis Depay then, as you just touched upon him there. Now, is this a risk for his career, playing Simeone ball, although Simeone has said he's going to leave at the end of the season, right?
I don't think that's fully confirmed, but there's loads of speculation.
Yeah, he's hinted at it. is this a risk for Barcelona? Because having gave them David Villa and Luis Suarez in the past, when they were deemed surplus to requirements, not boded well for them. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on this deal? Because mine was £3 million for a player of this caliber, despite, I know his contract is running out in June, but getting him off one of your big rivals for that paltry fee, when I think he's still underestimated as a player or what he can produce, felt good for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly in his first season, prior to getting injured under Koeman and then Xavi, he was really flying. I think he ended up with 13 league goals, which was, I think, Barcelona's top scorer, which was a pretty solid return. He's had a lot of injury issues. He's not Xavi's man. They signed Lewandowski. They signed Ferran Torres since his arrival. One of those hasn't really worked out at all, Ferran Torres. But there's a certain amount of pressure on him going to Atletico Madrid, just because he's replacing Cunha and Felix's output. But at the same time, neither of them have been exceptional for Atletico Madrid this season, and it's such a low fee. I kind of agree with you. I think he's a very underrated player. We've seen that for Holland in particular over the last 3-4 years, really, actually. And I think he can make a difference to Atletico between now and the end of the season. It feels like maybe they've signed another 10 when they've kind of got quite a few 10s already, and Griezmann can play there. Correa is more of a 10 than a 9. So there's a certain amount of pressure on Morata between now and the end of the season. But yeah, for a fee of absolutely no consequence whatsoever, it just seems like pretty sensible.
Signed a deal until 2028 as well, apparently. Your thoughts on it?
If we didn't know about, I think Barcelona have done well here. I think this is good. They should have taken more money while they could. If they could have got him out, though it sounds like they couldn't.
He didn't want to leave.
So you think they've done well because get his wage off the book? He clearly wasn't favoured by the manager.
Yeah, he's got 6 months left on his deal, and they've got his wages off the books, and they've got $3 million for him. I think that's actually pretty good in the end. It's certainly no risk for him because it's an incredibly long contract. So when we talk about his career, this is his career. There's nothing after this, really. This is going to take him up till he's 34 years old, this contract. So who cares? And I'd kind of look at Joao Felix coming back at the end of the season. I'd think, if I'm Memphis Depay, I think that could be quite interesting. I quite like to play with him and Griezmann, and Yannick Ferrer Carrasco is not going the opposite way. So
that was hilarious.
It was an interesting move.
He was like mooted as, what was it? Depay plus some cash for Carrasco, and Atletico were like, we want 50 mil for him. Barcelona were like, okay, maybe not.
I wouldn't be bothered if I was Barcelona about the kind of Suarez of it all, because you're way ahead of Atletico Madrid. Yeah. Atletico Madrid are not good. Barcelona are top of the league by, I think, 3 points now. Barcelona are odds on to win the title. Atleti are going to have to change this summer in a quite significant way, move on from a regime which has come to define that club, really, over more than a decade now, assuming Simeone actually goes. Has that been totally confirmed?
No, but I feel like it's one of those.
It looks like it's happening.
We're worst kept secrets in football.
One of my sources, I actually, the first time I ever do have a source, and he said it was happening.
Okay, right. Well, yeah, it looks like that's going to happen. But I don't particularly like it for Atleti. $3 million for him, that's obviously a good fee. A 5-year contract, which means you're paying for his 29 to 34 years. That's bad. That's such a long contract for a guy of this age who, let's be honest, has had pretty significant injury problems at different parts of his career. Now, he's a phenomenal player when he's on the field, but you don't give a 5-year contract to a guy at this stage of his career. That's far too long.
It must have been at a reduced wage.
Well, you'd hope so, but it's far too long. Like taking him up to 34 years old, it's not about how good he is this half season or next season even. Maybe not even the season after that. It's about those last couple of years where you're paying out this contract to a guy who is on his last legs. And let's be honest as well, has never really been feted for his work rate. So that would concern me a little bit.
No, but I suppose not heavily dependent on his physicality to produce, solid output or results in the final third, right? Like
he's never been rapid. Yeah.
We saw it. Leon was capable of being.
He has been pretty fast,
progressive passer, this playmaker. Even at Barcelona, we saw shades of that as well. So,
but I think that's worse. I think that's exactly the opposite of how I look at it. If a guy's really fast, then as he ages, he'll probably lose some pace, but still be reasonably quick. If you've got a guy who's not quick at all and he loses some pace, you've then got a guy who's kind of trudging around the pitch and is a serious problem.
But what I was saying there is he's not going to fall from a great height in terms of his physicality. And even if he just deteriorates gradually from where he is now, I think he could still play at particularly in La Liga, at a high level till he's 33.
Well, that's what they're betting as well. But I personally wouldn't have done this deal at anything like this contract length.
So
I've gone maybe 3.
Risk in terms of length of contract.
I don't mind it.
Don't mind it. Yeah, I don't mind it. Maybe it is a year too long, but if they've knocked 30k a week off his wages as a result, then whatever. Okay, last but not least, then let's do these in quick-fire fashion. We've got Danny Ings to West Ham and Nicholas Jackson to Southampton. Which one would you like to take on, gentlemen, first?
Well, Nicholas Jackson, for a club that have signed a lot of very promising young players, this is another promising young player, but it's a big fee actually for once for Southampton in their recent business. So this feels like a bit of a risk. I don't think he's really set the world alight at Villarreal by any means. And then Danny Ings just always moves in the dark. Never see it coming. Just off to West Ham. It didn't feel like he was probably going to be very suited to the Unai Emery ball at Aston Villa. Another very good finisher for West Ham to have. I think Scamacca's maybe slightly underperformed as far as I was expecting him this season, but Mikel Antonio's injuries aren't helping there, so they needed to get a body in. But it's really chance creation with West Ham. I just don't think they create enough chances, which is strange given the amount of sort of creative players they've had behind. But they've just been really off the boil this year.
I think they have been, when you look at their expected goals against, expected points, blah, 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 probably the biggest or the most unlucky team, let's say, this season. I think there's probably a big old discrepancy between where they are and the points they've warranted with their performances. But yeah, I know West Ham fans aren't happy. And people saying that, if West Ham lose to Everton, that they'll fire exactly they'll fire Moyes and then Everton will hire Moyes. But
I don't think they're hiring Lampard. It's not a swap.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's a little bit of a risk, isn't he? Particularly I think the fee was around 18 mil. What are your thoughts on Danny Ings? I know that you're a big fan.
He's whatever. He's fine. Like, I like Danny Ings when he plays. Like, he works hard. He is a pretty good finisher. He's capable of being creative. You can imagine him dovetailing with Bowen pretty well, a fully fit Bowen, who is maybe in better form than he has been across this campaign. It's okay. I probably wouldn't do it. I guess I just look around at other deals that people are doing, and I do still think there's a lot of value to be had. You look at Bournemouth negotiating for Dongo Ouattara and supposedly for Enzo Lefebvre, which if they get him would be staggering.
And I think Danjuma on loan as well.
Yeah, those are phenomenal moves. To me, that's kind of the benchmark for stuff like this. I think, can we get somebody else for this money? And I think generally the answer is yes. So it's fine. I just don't want to sign Danny Ings on a permanent deal. How old is he now? Is he 30, 31?
I think 29, 30.
Okay.
Maybe
I've got
30,
30 in my head. But
yeah, well, then if it's a short contract, sure, but I doubt it is. And this just feels like West Ham kind of said, right, we experimented with a period where we tried to do some more intelligent stuff in the transfer market. Let's do some dumb again. Let's play the hits. And so they've kind of gone back to their old ways, which is let's get somebody off a Premier League side.
If it is 15,
it's whatever.
And the
yeah,
wages,
it's fine.
and the wages modest, and I am
Depends what the
fine
contract
with it.
is.
I mean, like you said, he has been effective when he started, 0.66 goals per 90 this season. The closest to that at Aston Villa is Leon Bailey on 0.31. They are struggling for goals and they're selling their leading goals.
They must have a plan
on 6, although I think 2 of them are penalties as well for Danny Ings. Yeah, and like you said, Unai Emery must just be like, I
bet next week they must have a striker coming in. You'll be talking about Aston Villa next week, I think.
Quick fires, then we'll do one quick fire, one personal wrap this up because I think we're being over for quite some time. Colm, best value transfer this January to flip the narrative on its head again.
Jan Sommer to Bayern Munich. Manuel Neuer injured his knee skiing or his ACL. Why he was going skiing, I'm not quite sure. But Jan Sommer, Bundesliga proven, one of the best goalkeepers in that league. Well, actually, really in Europe for quite a while. I think he's been really underrated. Short-term deal, low fee. I think it was about 7 million euros. Perfect.
If Ouattara or Lefebvre, if Lefebvre goes for under 20 mil, which is the rumour, that'll be staggering.
Well, the Bournemouth owners bought 30% of L'Oreal, hasn't he? So it does look like they are going to go to Bournemouth. Okay, nice. Personal questions from Yimmy. Favourite household chore?
Hoovering.
Oh yeah, that was really very quick as well. Is that very therapeutic for you or what?
Yeah, I was doing it yesterday. It just got me in the zone again. Yeah, we've got a Dyson, and oh my goodness, Dyson's
cordless?
Insane. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. You can put it on max power, and seriously, that is just.
Yeah, but then it's out of charge so quickly. That's the issue. We have the Dyson
Risk we're
ball
taking.
because I like the little gun thing, but it just runs out of power.
Mate,
so
I've gone
quickly.
for the Shark for that exact reason. Longer battery life. You get 2 batteries of it as well. That's the
What advertising for Dyson?
Yeah.
Not like they need it on Sunday.
That's the
nights,
money
to be fair.
ball of vacuum purchases. The Shark. Favorite household chore? Hoovering. Or vacuuming?
I don't mind washing up, but to be honest, everything to do with the baby is kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, like we tidy her nursery, and that feels really nice and therapeutic.
I don't mind washing up either. And I asked the Discord for these questions. Shout out to the Discord. Go and join the Discord if you're not a part of our fan run channel. There'll be a link in the description below. And they said that washing up pretty much finished bottom. And I put it top as well because it feels like when you're doing it, have the radio on. When you're doing it, really scrubbing the dirt off. You're really in the trenches.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a heavy duty chore, and I've earned my
Really?
downtime.
I also
after
think
this.
there's
I'd
like
rather
a bit
do-
of a hierarchy as well. But washing up people get a lot of respect, whereas the dryers are just like, they're just your minions, really.
Yeah.
And you can come off and you whip.
You don't even need
That's
a
not a
dryer.
chore. That's not a fully fledged chore. Drying.
No,
Don't try
that's
and-
an unnecessary thing. That you can't do something that the air does.
Yeah,
Like,
don't
it's a
ride on my
chore.
coattails
Yeah.
as the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Emptying and unloading the dishwasher machine. That's the job. I absolutely despise
I
that.
quite
job.
like the machine though. I haven't got a machine because I rent in London. But when I at my family house, when you're filling the dishwasher, it feels like a little game of Tetris, which I quite like. It's
Shit,
quite
hate
nice
it.
for my OCD
I
to
would
be like,
rather.
nothing else can fit in here and everything's perfectly laid out.
I would rather empty the dishwasher than empty my laundry though. Like when you have to hang up your laundry.
Oh, that is
my
lovely.
God.
Yeah,
And your little
that's
socks
awful.
and your box. Oh, it's a pain.
Takes forever. Never dries as quickly as you want it in the
On
winter.
the error. The socks one by one is depressing at the end, isn't it?
Nightmare.
Is there any we've missed out? Any big ones?
Well, I mean, cooking doesn't really count as a chore, but I'd actually
It can
rather
be a
hoover
chore.
than cook, to be honest.
Right, okay.
Yeah, same. But hoovering, I've got to be honest, hoovering is an easy job.
Nice.
It looks busy, but it's easy.
Yeah. I also don't buy into like dusting isn't. That's like a
Not
side
crucial.
quest.
Yeah.
That's not a fully fledged chore. Because I've seen, when you dust, you just.
I don't think I've ever dusted, to be
You
honest.
do it on an ad hoc basis. You see a cobweb.
That means
and you're
Grace
like,
does it,
Right, it's
yeah.
time to do it.
Yeah.
I've got an extendable duster, which I do like.
Nice.
It goes so far, and I can just stand in the middle of a room and be like,
And that is satisfying because you do feel like you're gaining the system somewhat. You're just like, well, I didn't have to climb on the counter to get that. Right. What's your favourite chore? Let us know in the comments below. And yeah, Pat, I'll get back to you.
"Yep,
Won't you?
nice."
Anything to plug across Football Daily, Europe Football Daily?
Why don't you go check out yesterday's Stat Wars? The competition's really hotting up. I can't exactly remember the episode yesterday, but yeah, there's like a 4-5-way title battle. Zach and Henry fighting out for relegation. So
Has
good
Henry
stuff.
won yet?
No,
Wow.
he's really down in the dumps.
He's crap.
And that's how we'll end it. Henry being crap at Star Wars. Thank you very much for watching. Like this video, subscribe to the channel with notifications on, and we'll catch you next week, probably at the Phoenix on Sunday Vibes. But who knows? We might be coming to a pub near you soon. Bye.